My name is Niall Coitir and I've written a book on trees, Irish trees, myths, legends and folklore. So I'm just going to talk to you a bit about some of the trees and also the OGHAM alphabet, which has a connection here with Sneem, and the connection between the OGHAM alphabet and the trees. So Sneem has a connection with OGHAM because Charles Graves lived in Park Nasilla, and Charles Graves was one of the first scholars in modern times to look at the OGHAM alphabet. He wrote a couple of very important articles talking about proving, for example, that it was a proper alphabet, and looking at all the different uses of the alphabet. And also he wrote about the names of the letters. Each letter in the OGHAM alphabet has a name, and the tradition is that the name, each letter name is that of a tree. So there's about 7 or 8 of them indisputably names of trees, and there's a kind of debate about the others, whether they're poetic versions of tree names or not. But anyway, he was one of the first scholars to discuss it seriously. So just in case you haven't not sure what the OGHAM alphabet is, it's the earliest form of writing in Irish, developed about the 5th or 6th centuries. And I just have a little booklet here. I can pass it around to people. This is, so you see the OGHAM monuments are scattered around. About 1/3 of them are in Kerry, and then in Cork and Waterford and up into Kilkenny. And there's also OGHAM inscriptions in Wales and Cornwall and Scotland, where the Gaels settled. So if you want to pass that around, you can have a look at what OGHAM, the alphabet looks like. So there's about 20 letters, and each letter is a different stroke. There's 1 to 5 strokes on either side of a line or a drim. So as I say, it was invented for sort of monuments and memorials and for short inscriptions on wood. And so when I say memorials or monuments, it's commemorating. They commemorate people who died, but they're not gravestones. There aren't people buried under them. So they're generally placed in important places within, say, a clan or a sept's territory. They'd be placed in an important place in that territory, or else they were boundary markers. They were sort of markers of land ownership. So there's, as I say, there's a huge number of them in County Kerry, and that's where it seems to be where the tradition of the OGHAM started, and then it spread eastwards across the country. So as I was saying, the OGHAM letters, each letter has a name to help people remember the alphabet. So just like the Greek alphabet was alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and so on, the OGHAM alphabet had each letter had a different name of a tree. One of the first ones I'm going to talk about would be the alder tree, or the letter F, which is 3 lines. Fern in Irish, you see, so the letter begins with an F sound. So the alder tree is one of our native trees. It grows near water, and so its wood is better able to withstand wet than other trees. When you cut an alder tree, first the wood looks white, but then it turns into a red colour because there's a kind of a reddish sap in the tree. So symbolically in mythology, that gave it a connection with sort of the idea of blood and war and death. So it became a warlike tree. So perhaps that was one of the reasons why it was a favourite for making shields. Another tree that features in the OGHAM alphabet is the ash tree, or the aun, which is the letter O. And of course the ash is one of our iconic native trees, a very good strong timber tree for making houses and buildings like that. And also, naturally enough, it was the tree for hurling. It's a strong timber, but it's also quite elastic. So the ash tree as well is known for growing near water, and it seems to be associated with holy wells very much. Many of the trees that you find around holy wells are ash trees. People would go on their pilgrimage on the patron day on the holy well, and they would say a prayer, and they generally do a turn around, say the rosary or something, and do a turn around the well, and also the tree as well. Tie a rag or something like that, a cloth, to the ash tree. Another tree associated with the OGHAM alphabet is B, that is the birch tree. The Irish for birch is be, which gives us the letter B. So the letter B is is named after the birch in OGHAM, and it's the first letter of the alphabet, the OGHAM alphabet, so it's just a single stroke. And which is interesting because the birch tree in nature, it's one of the first trees to colonize open ground. If you were to cut down a forest, the birch would be one of the first trees to come back, because it's quite a short-lived tree, but it spreads very quickly. So it's got these tiny little seeds that spread out. So it is associated with sort of beginnings and new birth. And I think that the silver birch as well, it's got that white bark. So this idea of the birch is sort of purity and youthfulness. So it was said that it's a good protection against the fairies, and that you should make your cradles out of birch wood, because they would protect your child very well from the fairies, and they're sort of innocent. It's sort of an innocent tree. And it's also a tree associated with love and youthfulness. So there'd be lots of poems about the poet meeting his lover for a tryst under the birch, in the birchwood bower. So there's a general idea of youthfulness and beginnings and so forth. In practical terms, the birch it's got these lovely twiggy little branches, so it was used for brooms and sweeping and so forth. So again, there's this idea of cleanliness and new beginnings, if you like. So that's the birch tree. Another tree associated with the OGHAM alphabet is the hawthorn, which is the letter H. The hawthorn is sort of the famous fairy tree in Ireland. There's lots of stories about what happened to people who interfere with the hawthorn tree. There's one story of a farmer he had a fairy fort in his land, and he had this hawthorn tree in the middle, and he wanted to clear away the field, so he cut down the hawthorn tree and cleared the field, and he was very happy with himself, and he went to bed that night. Woke up in the middle of the night roaring with pain because the fairies had come and put all the thorns of the hawthorn tree into the bed beside him, so he was cut to pieces. So that's what happens when you interfere with the fairy tree. And I'm told that belief in the fairies and fairy trees continued right up until modern times. There's the famous Ennis bypass where workers refused to cut down a fairy tree there. Eddie Lenihan from Clare talks about it. And so even today the route of the bypass goes around this fairy tree. So I think maybe it's not so much that people believe, it's just people think, well, why cause any trouble? You know, better safe than sorry, you know. The hawthorn was also used around holy wells, so it seems to be the main rag tree, as people call it. They would say a prayer and then they would tie a rag to the hawthorn to sort of, as a symbol of their hope that their prayer would be answered. And that still seems to be a tradition that's going strong. There's many fairy trees around the country associated with holy wells. Another tree is the hazel tree, and that is the letter C in the OGHAM alphabet, or Cull. It's actually named after the tree. So it's always been a very important tree in Irish tradition because it's got practical uses. The nuts have always been a favourite source of food, and the hazel wood is used to make hurdles. And one of the Irish name for Dublin is Baile Átha Cliath, which means the town of the ford of the hurdles, and the hurdles are probably made of hazel. It's a bit like wickerwork, but only stronger. You can coppice the hazel. They used to make houses out of them. The Viking houses would be made out of the wattle. They'd be made out of hazel, woven together, and then they put in the mud. The mud and wattle houses would be made of hazel. So, and in mythology as well, of course, the hazel tree was very important because in myth there were 9 sort of mystical hazel trees that stood at the source of the Boyne, and these trees would drop their nuts into the pool at the source of the Boyne, and then the salmon of knowledge would eat the hazelnuts, and for every nut it ate, a purple spot would appear on its side. So a wise seer called Finnegas realized that if he caught the salmon of knowledge and ate it, that he would acquire all the wisdom and the poetic inspiration of the salmon. So he spent years trying to catch the salmon, and eventually he caught the wily old salmon and was putting it to to cook over the fire, and there was a young Finn McCool there who was just a youth at this time, and he set Finn McCool to watch over the salmon, but on no account to eat any of it, because he wanted all the wisdom for himself. So of course the story goes that Finn McCool was watching the salmon cooking away and being very dutifully minding it, but a blister arose on the side of the salmon, and he just popped it with his finger without thinking and burnt his finger. And then because he'd burnt his finger, he sucked his thumb to sort of soothe it and took some of the skin of the salmon. In the stories and various legends, when he's going into battle, if he wanted to know what his enemies were doing, he just suck his thumb, and the wisdom of what was happening would come to him then, you see. So it was a very useful thing to do to burst the bubble on the salmon. Another important tree that appears in the OGHAM alphabet is the holly tree, and that's the letter T. And holly is, again, one of our native trees, one of our few evergreen trees, and it's kind of an understory tree in native woodland, so it's a good habitat during winter months for birds and other creepy crawlies to kind of find shelter. So even though it's a small tree, the holly is the wood of the holly is very strong and tough. So it was used to make handles of spades and handles of knives and other implements like that. And in ancient Ireland, it was used for the axles for chariots, because it grows up very strong and straight. So it has this sort of tough kind of look. As well as that, because it's an evergreen tree and it has these lovely shiny green leaves and shiny red berries, it's a favourite for Christmas decorations. And the story goes that the name holly comes from holy, that the red berries are supposed to symbolise Christ's drops of blood, and the leaves are supposed to symbolise Christ's crown of thorns. So that's supposedly why it's called the holly. So it's a very popular decoration even today, but it's a very slow growing tree. So it's becoming a bit scarce in the wild because people are actually cutting it for Christmas decorations. So if you are going to buy holly, people grow it sustainably and sell the leaves, the branches, as holly decorations, so as Christmas decorations. So if you are buying your Christmas decorations, be sure to get them from a sustainable source. Holly is also unusual among trees in that you have a male and a female tree. Most trees are both male and female, but a holly tree, to get the berries, that's the female tree. She needs a male tree planted nearby so that the pollen from the male tree can fertilize the female tree. So you need two trees, the male and female, if you're going to get your lovely red berries. Another tree that's obviously very important is the oak tree, and that is the letter D, or for Dar, which is the name of the letter D in the OGHAM alphabet. And of course the oak tree is very important because it's a very good timber tree. It's been used for centuries to make, everything, buildings, houses, it's a good strong timber tree, and because of that it's associated with kingship and strength and royalty, not just in England. Hearts of oak is sort of a symbol of British royalty, but not just there, but in Ireland too, it's a symbol of royalty. And you'd often see the chieftain would have an oak tree growing outside his house, outside his fort or his rath, or dune on the bawn outside, as a sort of a symbol of his strength. So as well as the wood, the other great use for the oak tree is that it has acorns, and while they're not very palatable to humans, they are palatable for pigs. So pigs love eating the acorns. So the chieftain or the local lord would have his own oak wood where he'd let all the pigs run around eating all the acorns, and so the pigs would get nice and fatten up on the acorns, and then the chieftain would have the best of pork and the best of meat as well, thanks to the oak tree. So oak is supposed to be famously associated with the Druids, and the classical writers would talk about how the oak tree was sacred to the Druids. And it seems there's something in that, because a lot of ancient early Christian sites are associated with oak woods. It seems there was a process of Christianization going on, where they would take over sacred oak woods, if you like, and Christianize them. So you have Derry and Dura Columcille, which is the oak wood of Columkill, and you've also got Kildare, Kildara, which is the Church of the Oak, which is associated with St. Bridget. And Durrow as well means the oak wood. So there seems to be an idea of taking and adapting the oak tree and oak woods and Christianizing them. So, as I say, that's another letter of the OGHAM alphabet. So another letter, another tree associated with the OGHAM alphabet is the willow tree, and the Irish for willow is sal, so it's the letter S, and it's the fourth letter in the alphabet, so you've got 4 different strokes as the letter S. So the willow is very useful tree because it's used for wicker work, like it can be coppiced, and you've got these strong, bendy, flexible branches that can be used for all kinds of making baskets and making chairs and making all sorts of, you can make small fences and things. It's a very useful tree. So the other thing was a willow is used for making harps. So the harpists in ancient Ireland would make their willow, the sounding board on the harp would be made of willow. Whatever quality is in the wood, it was seen as good for harps. And the 14th century harp in Trinity College, known as the Brian Boru harp, is made out of willow. So there's a famous legend about that, which is about the Leinster king, Lowry Lynchuk. And he, for whatever reason, he had horse's ears. He was put under a curse or something, and he was given horse's ears, and he used to grow his hair really long, so he would hide this. This was a great secret. But every now and then he'd have to have his hair cut just to keep it trim. So whatever barber he would get would be told to keep the secret of his horse's ears under pain of death. So one of the barbers, he cut his hair and was keeping the secret of his horse's ears, and this secret was weighing on him, and he felt he just had to tell somebody the secret, pass it on to somebody. So he saw this willow tree growing by the side of the river, and he said, I'll tell the tree. So he goes to the tree and he says, Lowry Lynchuk has horse's ears. And feeling a bit better with himself that he told somebody or something, he went on his way. And some years later then the willow tree was cut down to make a harp, and the harpist brought the harp into Lowry Lynchuk's hall for the first time to try it out. And when the harpist went to play the harp, the only tune the harp would play was Lowry Lynchuk has horse's ears, Lowry Lynchuk has horse's ears. So the secret is out. You can't keep secrets forever. So willow is also contains salicin, which is a kind of aspirin. So it was used as a cure for fevers. It's an important, was important in folk medicine for that reason. Now another tree is the yew tree, is associated with the OGHAM alphabet as well. That's the letter I for Ure, and the yew tree is also a very important tree in ancient Ireland. It's got a good tough wood, and was used, attractive red coloured kind of a wood. So it was used in buildings, and it was used to make containers as well. And in ancient Ireland it was used too for making bows and spears, because again it's strong and flexible. So the yew tree is also found near graveyards and churches, and there's lots of different theories as to why this should be. There's a symbolic idea that it's an evergreen tree and it's very long lived. A yew tree can live up to 1,000 years, so maybe it's a symbolic one of eternity in the afterlife and evergreenness, or else there's a more practical reason. It's supposed the leaves of yew tree are poisonous. The name Taxus baccata, Taxus is toxic. So there's an idea that it was planted in graveyards to stop cattle coming into the graveyard and wandering around and knocking over headstones and eating eating grass. So it was meant to deter livestock from coming in. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. So the yew tree as well is associated with many monastic sites. There's Newry in County County Armagh, isn't it? So it means on tour, as Newry means the place of the yew tree. And Glendalough as well has yews and yew trees, and just everywhere, like it's a tradition that's continued. And as well, we are unusual in Ireland. You see there's two kinds of yew trees. There's a native yew tree that spreads out like that, but there's also what people call the Irish yew, which spreads upwards. And these all come from a particular kind of yew tree that was grown in Florence Court in County Fermanagh. It was just, when I say grown, it grew naturally. It was just a fastigiate form, is what gardeners would call it, like it just grows upwards. So people thought this was a very attractive kind of tree. So its cuttings have been taken from it, and you can see it all over the world now and everywhere. These yew trees that grow straight up like that, they all come from this Florence Court yew in County Fermanagh from the 18th century. But as I was saying, yew trees are very ancient trees, and they can live to be 1,000 years, but nobody can say exactly how old a yew tree is, because they start rotting in the centre and being hollowed out. So you can't really count the rings of a yew tree, because unfortunately the centre rots away. So I think about the oldest yew tree we have in Ireland is supposedly, it's called the Silken Thomas yew in Maynooth, and that's about 500 years old. You see it in the grounds of Maynooth College. The last one I'll talk about would be the rowan tree, which is the letter L. Lish means flame. So some people argue that the rowan tree has the flame red berries, so maybe it's a poetic name for the rowan tree. So the rowan is very much known for its magical properties in Irish folklore. So a sprig of rowan was tied to the tails of cattle to keep away the fairies, or it was tied, a sprig was put over the stable door or whatever, or tied to the tails of dogs even, or any kind of farm animal, to keep away the fairies or evil spirits. I think it's this idea of fire, and the colour red is sort of seen as a protection against the fairies, because it's pure and purifying and powerful and strong. So that was especially done at times, the particular times of the year like May Eve or Halloween, where the fairies were meant to be particularly active, and so that was the time they took particular care to put the sprig of rowan, or mountain ash is another name for it, around the barn door or over the doors of the house, as well as over the cattle. And they were particularly obsessed with fairies stealing the goodness out of the milk. So they'd have to put the sprig around the milk churns or underneath or whatever, and they have this idea that the milk might, when the fairies stole the goodness of the milk, it might look exactly the same and taste the same, but the goodness would be gone out of it. So they were kind of a bit paranoid about that, and so the rowan tree or the mountain ash was the best tree for dealing with that. So that was my last tree. I could go on and talk about more trees, but as you can see, there's a wealth of folklore associated with trees, and the OGHAM alphabet has got, in medieval tradition anyway, each of the letters was associated with a tree. So I hope you enjoyed listening to all that, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.